Hello everyone, my name is Dima and this is my new story from the Soviet era apartment. In the desk where the apartment owner used to work in Soviet times, I found some documents that were neatly stored in a drawer. Among them were driver's licenses, educational certificates and workbooks. Also, I found a membership card for the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and a document for membership in the district council. These Soviet documents made me think about how elections were conducted in the USSR in general. After all, it's especially relevant now, when people are only talking about US elections and their outcomes on the internet. What about the USSR, a country where one party, the Communist Party, held a dominant position? Who were the candidates and who were elected? Let's find out.
Добрый вечер.
Здравствуйте, товарищи.
The basis of the electoral system in the USSR was established by the Stalin's constitution. Why Stalin's? This was adopted in 1936 during Stalin's reign and became the fundamental law of the country for many years afterwards. The constitution granted Soviet citizens a wide range of civil rights and freedoms, including universal, equal, and direct suffrage through secret ballot. Historians have described it as the most advanced and democratic constitution at the time, more so than in many European democratic countries. However, this was only on paper. In reality, things were somewhat different. Elections in the USSR took place at various levels. Voters selected members of the Supreme Soviet, the highest body of government power. Additionally, elections for local councils of workers' deputies took place. The main feature of Soviet elections was the one-party system, which meant that only the Communist Party of the Soviet Union could participate in them. This meant that voters had no choice but to support candidates approved by the party. The right to nominate candidates belonged to organizations affiliated with the Communist Party, such as trade unions and youth organizations. All these organizations were under strict control of the party, and the number of candidates always corresponded to the number of seats available. Such elections are also called uncontested. There was simply no choice between different candidates. A voter could only spoil their ballot or vote against everyone if they wanted to vote against a pre-selected candidate, while a candidate could be voted for simply by submitting a blank ballot. Although the elections were formal, they were of great importance for legitimizing the power of the Communist Party. They demonstrated the support of the people and created an atmosphere of democracy. Voting took place at specially designated locations called polling stations. These were usually located in schools, clubs, or other public buildings. Voters would receive a ballot with a list of candidates, make their choice, and drop the ballot into a sealed ballot box. Interestingly, polling stations often had voting booths for privacy, but few people used them. It was believed if a citizen hid in a booth, they were either voting against the government or writing some kind of protest. Upon receiving a ballot, Soviet citizens would usually immediately mark their choice and throw it into the box. Another notable fact was that voters could vote not only for themselves, but also for family members and friends if they had their passports on hand. Before the elections, posters were hung everywhere for several days, calling on Soviet citizens to vote. Also, notifications were sent by mail to inform citizens where and when they could cast their vote. Agitators from the polling stations also visited apartments to remind residents about the upcoming elections. These agitators did not campaign for specific candidates, but instead, they gathered information about the number of residents in each apartment, verified this information against official records, and ensured that everyone was aware of the voting location and time on the day of the election. In case of health-related issues, the agitator would make a note to ensure that a portable ballot box was delivered to the home. And the most interesting thing is that voting day was made into a holiday. It was considered a very festive weekend. Elections were held on Sunday, which increased turnout. By the way, turnout in elections in the USSR was always below 99%. Music was played at polling stations, and a buffet was open in the morning with various delicious goods and pastries. Some products that could not always be found in stores were available at the election. People loved the elections and participated actively. Many people from those days remember the elections with great warmth. Here is an example from the memoirs of a resident of Irkutsk.
I remember the election as a holiday. I remember that I used to gather solemnly with my grandparents, put on better clothes, and we went to vote. I was being led by the handle. I came across acquaintances, also with children. Everyone is happy, with grocery bags. We went to school. There were usually ballot boxes there. Try to come early in the morning. It had a special meaning. If you get there early, you'll get more food from the buffet.
And men like to remember that not only food and goodies were traded during the elections. You could also buy the best quality Belomorkanal cigarettes, which were popular in the USSR and produced in Moscow and Leningrad. Vodka was also sold at some polling stations. We can rightfully say that the way to elections in the Soviet Union was through the stomach. The day after the elections, the results were announced on all 2 television channels and all 4 radio stations in the USSR, celebrating the victory of democracy and progress in the country of socialist development. Hurrah! During the years of Soviet rule, the election process followed a similar pattern. They were held every few years, usually in March. The process began with notifications to the public and the publication of candidate biographies, followed by visits to polling stations where voters received a ballot with a single surname and cast their votes in the ballot box, then transferred to the buffet.
Guys, if you watched this video until the end and found it interesting, please let me know what you think in the comments. I look forward to hearing from you. Our story about the Soviet election has come to the end. Bye bye.